Hello, this is Overlord Bo, and today I'll be covering the upcoming Pan American Battleship line featuring the Tier 10 Libertad. Now, the Libertad line is a representation of a collection of hypothetical ships inspired by the US and British ship designs that could have been theoretically purchased by various South American nations. Now, this particular line is the highly anticipated secondary brawler line for the Pan American battleships. This thing has insane secondaries, good guns, along with a combat instruction that increases the secondary range to over 15 kilometers, which makes it have the longest secondary range in the game during that combat instruction. And we'll be hopping right into it. Now, you guys can pause the video at any time while I'll be showcasing the build of this ship. You guys, of course, can build this ship however you want, but pretty much this build's a pretty simple build. You're just building on the strengths of this ship, which is the secondaries and great concealment. So, of course, in Module 1 and 3, it's going to be secondary focused, with Module 1 being the secondary and anti-air health. Module 3 is going to be the secondary range and accuracy, and in the skill tree you'll be taking both the secondary skills along with brisk to be able to go quicker pretty much as you're sneaking up upon enemies, and of course you're building into concealment as well. So let's start off talking about this ship's hull. Now, the hull of this ship is definitely very long, so it's definitely a long boy for sure. You do have a somewhat mediocre HP pool of 85,500. It's definitely not the healthiest tier 10 battleship, so you definitely have to be wary of that when you do decide to W into your enemies, or if you decide to do some long range shooting. Now, this ship does have a 32mm bow / stern, which will definitely help you against bow tanking or when you're cutting away from a lot of the bigger battleships of the tier. Now, of course, if you're facing something like a Hanover or a Yamato or a Satsuma, they're still going to pow right through your bow, so you do have to try to angle and get ricochets off your side during those. But against any other battleship that has a 459mm in flow, you're going to be perfectly fine with being bow in or just aft to them. Now, you do have a 51mm deck / side armor. This will help you against a lot of the lighter cruisers of tier 10 and 9 and even super ships, where they don't have that 51mm HE pen to be able to go through your deck and side armor. Now, of course, they can still hit your superstructure, but as you can see in the middle of the ship, there is 2 guns there as well, which will act as a little bit of extra armor. So it'll help you be able to tank a little bit more against those HE throwers. Now, for the belt armor, you do have a 406mm belt armor, which will definitely help you on not getting citadeled. But again, you do have it above water citadel, so make sure you're not just showing flat broadside to any battleship, or you're just going to get death struck. So definitely be careful of that. Now, overall, if you want to compare this thing's survivability to something else, you do have better survivability than a Schlieffen, but you're not going to have the tankability of something like a Kremlin or a Montana in that regard. Moving on, let's talk about this ship's 12 guns. Yes, this ship has 6 turrets with a total of 12 guns in total that are 419mm guns with 6 turrets. Very similar to the Fuso design, which I totally hate that, by the way. The 419mm allows you to pin 27mm and below bow in ships. So pretty much you have something like a Des Moines that's sitting bow into you. You are able to pin that bow and do a lot of damage. So definitely definitely taking note of that. This ship does have a 20.5 kilometer range with a 33-second reload, which is pretty average, slightly slow for the tier, with a 1.7 sigma with standard battleship dispersion. So below average accuracy overall, but you got so many guns, so you'll hit that broadside of the bar no problem. The ballistics of this ship are very similar to the Conqueror, with a slight damage nerf to the guns, like to the damage. So if you're used to playing the Conqueror, then these shells are very similar to that. But of course, this ship does not get the insanely high HE damage and fire chance of the HE shells of the Conqueror. This gets the regular HE shell damage, so do not expect those high HE shell damages on this ship. You'll mostly just be using AP on this ship. For the turret diverse, you have a 30-second turret diverse, which is pretty good for how many guns you have. Overall, the guns are okay. You have enough of them. Well, you'll hit something, right? You'll hit something, so you gotta, you just gotta believe and you'll hit something for sure. I've had some pretty good salvos in this ship, even though it's only 1.7, but that's only if you get all of your guns on firing. Most of the time, you're trying to use the really good secondary angles on this ship to where you're only using about 3 of the guns at a time in the front and 3 on the rear. If you try using all of the guns all the time, you're going to be showing a lot of unnecessary broadside, which will make you take a lot of damage. So a lot of the time, you want to stay angled, use that 32mm bow to your advantage, shoot about 3 of the guns at a time, not all of them, because if you try to use all of them, you're going to take a lot of damage. Moving on, let's talk about the secondary battery, the main feature of this ship, which is the secondary battery and the combat instruction. So let's hop right into that. On this ship, you get 10 twin 234mm guns, which is 20 total for those 234mm, with 827mm guns. These 234mm guns can pen 59mm of armor. Pretty much, you're going to have 10 234mm guns on one side and 10 on the other, and then you'll have 427mm on one side and 1 on the other. So you'll have 14 secondaries on each side going off, as long as you have that side showing, or on both sides. You can have them going on both sides, have that full secondary gaming moment. Now you do get the improved secondary dispersion, same as the Schlieffen, so you're going to have incredibly accurate secondaries on this ship. You also have very strong firing angles. You're able to shoot all of your secondaries off of 28 degrees off the bow and 23 degrees off of the rear. So if someone is pushing you, they're going to be in worlds of hurt and barely be able to do damage to you as you're that angled. And you're just going to be melting them with that 59mm pen on those bigger secondaries. Now, the base range of these secondaries is 8.3 kilometers with a 12.5 kilometer secondary range with the skills and the upgrades and the signal flag. Now, the best part of this ship is that when you have the combat instruction active, which makes it where you do 30% more secondary shell damage, you have a 20% secondary range and a 20% secondary reload time, and this is active for 30 seconds. It makes it where your secondary range goes to 15.1 kilometers. You heard that right, 15.1 kilometers. This line has the longest secondaries in the game, and these suckers pack a punch. Now, these secondaries have an excellent DPM, but they're not as strong as the Schlieffen unless the combat instruction is active. If the combat instruction is active, then this ship has the highest secondary DPM in the game, and boy, does it melt anything. With that high amount of pen, the amount of DPM, how active it is, if there's anything in your secondary range, you are just going to melt it. And this thing's going to be so much fun to play when it comes out. Now, let's talk about more about the combat instruction and how it works. Pretty much like I said before, you get a 30% secondary shell damage, plus 20% secondary range, and a 20% secondary reload when it is active. Now, it is active for 30 seconds, and then you have to do the process of getting it all over again. So how it works is that for the main guns, they contribute 6.5% per hit, and secondaries do not add to this. Only the main guns do. And per each 1,000 potential damage you're taking, it adds 0.15% to the bar. So even if you're not hitting your shots with the main battery, as long as you're taking some kind of fire at you, so say you take 100,000 potential damage, right? that adds 15% to the progress bar, theoretically, right? So that's how it works. So with this combat instruction, it makes it have the longest secondary range in the game. It is incredible. It makes this thing have the best secondary DV for 30 seconds. It is just insane. This thing is so much fun to play with a secondary brawler. If you like brawling, you're definitely going to have a fun time with this ship. And I'll explain how to get this ship later down in the video. But pretty much, the ship is going to be going to early access. This early access will be ending in about 13.9. So it'll be starting in 13.8 and it'll be ending in about 13.9 or 13.10. So it should be around November is when it'll be ending. Since this early access will be starting in September, it's usually about 2 months is how long it lasts. So it'll be lasting until about November. So I think it's like 13.10 is what that's going to be. So just expect it around then for 13.10 then. So moving on, let's talk about the anti-air. The anti-air is really good. The short and the mid-range is really good for this ship. But the anti-air for long range is really lacking on this ship. Even though you do have the 15.8 kilometer anti-air, the long range anti-air, this thing is really, really bad. So most of the time, CVs are going to be able to get their full strikes on you anyway, and just be able to harass you a lot. So pretty much the typical battleship experience in the house. Moving on, the next thing we'll be talking about is the anti-submarine warfare. You do get the standard tier 10 battleship airstrike, which is pretty good due to the 11 kilometer range. You just have to hit the submarine and you'll be sinking them in no time. Next thing we'll be talking about is this ship's great maneuverability. This ship has a 30 knot top speed, which is pretty average for the tier, which is why you build into brisk so that you can get up to about 33 knots. This ship is also getting a buff. In this video, it doesn't show it, but the acceleration that's found on the Vermont and the St. Vincent, this ship in this line will be getting. So you'll be able to speed up really quick with this ship, which will help you a lot in those dodging incoming shells or torpedoes. It's going to make this ship a really big threat with that high acceleration. You also get a really good turning radius on this ship, surprisingly for how long it is. It has a 910 meter turning radius, which is really good for a tier 10 battleship. It has a 13.6 rudder shift time, which is also very good. And of course, you'll be building into the rudder shift in module 4 due to the fact that whenever that acceleration buff comes in, you will not be able to build in the propulsion mod. So of course you'll be building into the rudder shift, which will make you turn even faster. Now overall, I'd say this ship is a very solid maneuverability that helps you in those close quarter combat brawls. So you'll have a lot of fun playing this ship in randoms, ranks, you name it. You're gonna have a lot of fun playing this ship. So much fun. You're definitely gonna enjoy it. Talking about that, we're moving on talking about the concealment. The ship has a best surface detection range of 13 kilometers and a 12.1 kilometer best air detect range. So pretty much if you're just going off of just being a secondary build, you have a 0.5 kilometer difference in between your detection range and your secondaries being able to shoot. Unless, of course, you have your combat instruction, which increases your secondaries to 15.1 kilometers. And of course, they did add it where if you have secondaries that are longer than your concealment, it does turn your concealment to whatever your secondary range is firing, just like the main gun. So, and that's, of course, if you're not in smoke. If you're in smoke, it's going to keep still the 2 kilometer proxy spotting as it's always been. But overall, this concealment is pretty good for a tier 10 battleship. It helps her close the gap to allow her secondaries to put in a lot of the work. For the consumables, you have 2. You have an improved 20-second damage control party, which is very similar to the US battleships. You also get the improved repair party similar to the US battleships as well. So as I said earlier about this ship taking a lot of designs from the British and American battleships models, this kind of comes into play with that there. Now, my overall opinion of this Pan American Battleship line, it is a brawling secondary ship lover's dream. Very similar to the German Schlieffen line. However, the way the two lines brawl is very different. The Liberta is definitely better protected than the Schlieffen with her 32mm bow/stern. It has more HP and has a better repair party. However, she is slower and slightly worse surface detection and lacks hydro for torpedo defense. Now, this difference may look small, but it does make it much harder to close secondary ranges in the long-range high-tier meta. Now, this is where the combat instructions come into play. They're the key to getting the most out of your secondaries. You pretty much want to charge with your main batteries and try to tank for most of the team. And then, once charged up, you try to get under 13 kilometers and rain secondary hell onto the enemy team. Now, this massive boost to your secondaries makes her the absolute best secondary battleship in the game for 30 seconds at least. She can even boost her secondary range to 15.1 kilometers, but again, I'll try to avoid this unless it's too dangerous to get any closer. Pretty much if there's a battleship outrunning you and they go outside of your 12.5 kilometer secondary range, you activate that bad boy, and then you're able to get as they're running away from you, you're still able to hit them with their secondaries, get those fires, get that HE damage coming in, and just do a ton of damage with it. You're gonna melt them as they try to run away. It's like, oh yeah, we're safe out the 12.5. Psych! You just activate the secondary range boost with that combat instruction, and bam, you're just gonna be melting them in no time. Also, something to note, the Pan American Commander is entering the World of Warships scene in 13.8 as well. So we're getting the early access of this line, and the Pan American unique commanders coming in as well. He's coming in as a unique, as in the collections, the little collections where you get those little puzzle pieces. When you complete the collection, you're then able to get him. So you have to get 60 of those little pieces, and then you're able to get him. Now, he has a few special enhanced skills. Pretty much the most important ones are for battleships. It makes it where, for the brisk, it increases it by 12.5 instead of 10, the regular 10%. For cruisers, it makes it where you, instead of the 450 HP, it gives you 500. And for destroyers, it also is a little 50 increase. So instead of 350, it goes to 400. The most important thing for this ship, for this commander, is the fact that it has two special talents that can be activated in randoms and ranked or other game mode besides clan battles and training rooms. You get relentless firing, which activates once per battle upon hitting enemy ships 175 times with main and secondary battery shells. You get a 5% battery reload buff, a 15% secondary battery reload buff, and a 10% torpedo tube reload buff. This is massive for both the San Martin line and this Liberta line. It's going to be amazing getting this talent activated. The other talent that this thing has is called Master and Commander. You can activate this pretty much it's active once per battle. After using your combat instruction twice, it raises the minimum amount of instruction progress from 0 to 20 until the end of the battle, and it makes it where your ship speed is increased by 5% until the end of battle. So pretty much, if you get 2 combat instructions off on this ship or the San Martin, it gives you a 20% buff to your combat instruction to make it where you get it faster. You get it 20% quicker each time, which is massive for the San Martin and for this ship. They'll be heavily relying on their combat instructions. Again, and like I was saying before, if you like brawling battleships, then this new line is going to be a no-brainer. You're going to love this thing. Now, they will struggle in randoms due to aircraft carriers and subs, but you're going to have a lot of fun in rank with the ships, in brawls, and the upcoming shuffle mode, as will be coming up in 13.9, which will be in October. And again, we were talking about this earlier. While the Pan American BBs will not be released for a few patches, they'll be entering early access starting in patch 13.8. So this patch in a few days, or if you're already here in September. Now that you can get the tier 8 Irpiranga can be obtained as the final reward for the paid track of the battle pass, which costs about 2,500 doubloons. So if you want to get that early, so you're able to get the base XP up in that ship, the ship XP, to be able to get the tier 9 Los Andes as soon as that's available, you can do that. Now you can also buy the tier 9 Los Andes, can be obtained in the consecutive bundles for tokens, while the Libertad is bought for doubloons at the end of the sequential bundles. Now, of course, I don't recommend people spending the money for this ship. You can just wait until it comes out. But if you get a lucky drop with the Los, or planning to complete the battleships anyways, then you're fine to get them and skip part of the grind. Now, that is my video on this ship and the captains and the combat instructions, a little bit about the early access event as well. If you guys have any questions or concerns, definitely let me know in the comment down below. This is Overlord Bo, and I'll talk to y'all later.